This table doesn't mean anything, this flower doesn't mean anything, this room doesn't mean anything. What does all that mean? Well, let's see, Course in Miracles, and the purpose of the Course in Miracles is to bring you to a place where the words are not needed anymore. It meets you where, or not you personally, but the human being, it meets the human being where the human being is in the realm of thought. The Course in Miracles would say that otherwise there is no meeting at all. It has to, first of all, meet the human being where it can be reached, and that is in the realm of thought. In the same way that a psychiatrist, in order to reach a deluded patient, there's no point in the psychiatrist telling the patient, I am telling you, you are not Napoleon. That will only strengthen the delusion of the patient that he is Napoleon. He will never reach the patient. But if the psychiatrist for a little while enters the mind of the patient and says, okay, so you are Napoleon. Suddenly there's a meeting. Once they have met, because the psychiatrists has entered the delusional system of the patient, once they have met, there's a possibility for him to take him out of the delusion. If they never meet, nothing can be done. In the same way, the Course in Miracles is attempting to reach people where they are in the realm of thought and gradually take you out of thought. But throughout the Course, thought is still used, but it will more and more in the later lessons, it points to the stillness. And towards the end, the final lessons, it says, the use for words is almost over now, towards the end of the Course in Miracles. So it takes you, it's designed to take you into presence or stillness. So if you can enter presence or stillness right now or wherever you are, if you already have presence and stillness, a spacious awareness in the background of your life when you deal with people and situations, you don't need the Course in Miracles. If you can enter stillness when you're not being disturbed, but as soon as you interact with people, you lose presence, awareness, or stillness, then the Course in Miracles may still be useful because it has certain lessons that can be used as pointers. For example, one lesson, I remember, it says, in a situation where you feel upset or angry or irritated, it says, you can say, I could see peace instead of this. I could see peace instead of this. It's a pointer. The words don't miraculously produce peace, but the words are pointing to the possibility of approaching that situation in a different state of consciousness. So really, the words are pointing to a different state of consciousness. It's not in the words, it's that to which the words point. So, and as the Buddhists tell us correctly, the finger pointing to the moon is not the moon. Only the dog might think that the finger pointing to the moon is the moon, because if you tell the dog, go there, most dogs, it will look at your finger. So it's not the words are pointers. And particularly useful, Course in Miracles, is for human interaction. It really uses relationships as spiritual practice. And that's a good thing. So many lessons can be applied to relationships, and you need it, or if the Course is right for you, it's definitely not for everybody, but it might be useful for some people who still find that they have a lot of conflict with other people and a lot of upset with other people. So you can bring the lesson into relationships. If you don't have that anymore, of course you don't need the Course in Miracles. And even if you understood deeply or could practice deeply just lesson 1 of the Course, it has 365 lessons. Just do lesson 1, nothing that I see here means anything. That's what the lesson tells you. This table doesn't mean anything, this flower doesn't mean anything, this room doesn't mean anything. What does all that mean? It means you are giving up all your interpretations and judgments. You're cleaning the blackboard of your mind, erasing all the scribbles on it, or let's call it deleting all the noise on the tape. No, they don't have tapes anymore. They delete all the digital signals, whatever they in your mind. Nothing that I see here means anything, takes you to a place of not knowing anymore. And what's left when nothing means anything? You're not thinking anymore. If you could do deeply lesson 1, don't need anything else. So, because it would stop your mind from its useless interpreting and judging and so on. So, in your own life, have you already practiced Course in Miracles lesson? Mm-hmm. If you still find difficulties in relationships with other people, you can still use it. Then it can help you to become more conscious there. In the end, it takes you to the essence of this teaching, which is awareness, pure awareness or stillness. And that's the end of, and also, by the way, the Course says this Course is a beginning, not the end. Mm. So it takes you to that place where you open yourself up to awareness, which can then flower through you. If it's for you, it's definitely not for everybody.
I use these sentences when I feel I'm getting angry now. So yes. I say some sentence and push it down.
Yes, but don't push it down. Don't push it down. Just, you can say the sentence and then allow it to dissolve if that's what it wants. Mm. Because if you get upset or angry and try to hold it down, it'll build up. Don't hold it down. Just allow it to dissolve. Different approach. Never attack an inner state. Mm-hmm. Never attack any emotion that arises because it creates resistance again. Mm-hmm. Allow it to be, and then if it's not resisted, it dissolves. Mm-hmm. Lovely practice. Mm-hmm. Now you asked something else about prayer. Yeah. The Indian man behind you.
And in general, prayers, is this a talking to me or how do you explain prayers?
That's a huge topic, of course, prayer. In the way he uses prayer as a kind of repetition, a kind of mantra, perhaps. The good thing about it, of course, is that it stops your mind from doing other things, like indulging in fear-producing thoughts or negativity-producing thoughts. So it stops your mind from that, but ultimately that kind of thing for us, for anybody, has to be left behind. When Jesus said, pray unceasingly or pray without ceasing, that does not mean, because it would be absurd, that he's telling you to continuously pray pray without, he's using prayer in a very different sense, but it's possible that people who wrote down what he said misunderstood because they didn't realize the truth in themselves. Jesus teaches presence. It points continuously to the present moment, the importance of the present moment, and the importance of staying awake. There are parables about going to sleep, not going to sleep, but staying awake. Jesus says, the truth will make you free, which implies that right the way you are not free, because you are run by the conditioning of your mind. So all the basic teaching is there, you just have to see it. Repetitive prayer, if you need it, that's what you will practice. And a time will come when it's no longer right for you. Any meditation method can be helpful. Let's talk about meditation. You have a method. Some people count while they meditate from 1 to 9, from 9 to 1, from 1 to 6, from 6 to 1. They count their breath, or they do this or that. They have a mantra that they repeat in their minds, which keeps out other kinds of thinking. Now, the purpose of a mantra is not to be stuck with the mantra, but to eventually let go of the mantra. The mantra reduces all thinking to just one thought movement. So you can focus on that, and then it's meant to be dropped. When you drop the one thought that was left, first your mind was full of all kinds of thoughts. Then the guru comes and says, I will give you a mantra. You repeat every day 500 times. And if you do that, it brings your mind to a one-pointedness. Some people then get attached to the mantra. Say, my mantra. No, then you are meant to, at some point, the guru will point out, it's time for you to let go, because what is left when all your thoughts have flown into one thought form, and then that one thought form is dropped, just awareness is left. So it can take you there. If you don't get stuck on the way, if you get stuck on the way, then you're stuck until you suffer a bit more again. So let's leave it at that. It's knowing when to let go of something that is helpful for a while, like a ladder. You climb up a ladder, and then you don't need it anymore. Or the Buddha has the famous example of a raft you use to cross a river. The raft in when the Buddha uses the parable of the raft, he's talking about the teaching, Buddhist teaching and Buddhist practice. So you use the raft to cross the river. When you have crossed the river, you don't carry the raft around with you. It's heavy. There's the point where you let go of the raft. And there's complete freedom then. And whether you still call that Buddhism or whether you still call yourself a Buddhist is up to you. But suddenly there's freedom. That's something is helpful for a while until it's a hindrance. Any kind of practice. And in the end, there is just awareness, presence, consciousness. And some gurus teach that directly. They hardly give you any technique. And that's for certain people who are ready for that, that's fine. So it's what you feel drawn to is what is right for you. and then know when it's time to let go. The story goes that he was the only one that understood that sermon of the Buddha, the one who smiled. I could have held this flower up and stopped speaking, and that would have, the Buddha's silent sermon 2,600 years ago, people still remember it. He sat there and he was going to speak, and then suddenly he saw this flower, and he took this flower and looked at it. For how long, nobody knows, but it must have gone on for a long time, and everybody got restless. That's called the Buddha's silent sermon. And then after half an hour or 1 hour, we don't know, because they didn't have clocks then, because they were all monks at that time, other people didn't have access to anything, to spiritual teachings. I talk about that in the New Earth at the beginning. One of the monks, all the other monks looked puzzled. What's he trying to do? What's he saying? And one monk suddenly started to smile. And the story goes that he was the only one that understood that sermon of the Buddha, the one who smiled. And this smile was, according to the story or the legend or the scriptures, the smile was passed on from generation to generation of teacher and pupil. So he became a teacher, that monk, and they say he passed on the smile, which really means the realization, to the next and the next and the next. And after 6 or 7 or whatever generations, it became the origin of Zen. That's how the story goes. So what is it then that he smiled about? Well, let's not conceptualize it. I think you will realize it for yourself as we progress here. Are we then returning, when we go into nature, are we then returning to the level that trees live at, or flowers, or minerals, or birds, whatever it is? Is it an act of return to a primordial stage of being? Not quite. We join whatever natural thing it is that we are perceiving, we join it in the state of no thought. But when we go there, we've gone through thought already. We rise above thought. The flower exists below thought. So, and then we meet in the dimension of no thought. But at a very deep level, we do not become the flower or the cabbage. Well, if you had a choice, you'd probably rather be a flower than a cabbage, but cabbage is beautiful too. We're not regressing. Cabbage is fine for the cabbage, but not for us. The cabbage is totally at ease with itself, one with the source, doesn't inhabit a world of problems, doesn't generate conflict. The cabbage is rooted in being. So is the tree. So is the flower. And even the dog, well, most of them, and the cat, except those who have lived for too long with neurotic humans, they are rooted in being. And this is why people love dogs and cats. There's actually a deep reason, a deep meaning to that, because they can sense that the dog or the cat is more deeply rooted in being, is more at rest within him or herself than the human. The human has gone out very far from the source into further and further differentiation. Everything originates from the one source of all life, the unmanifested, formless, timeless, one source. Everything then comes out of that source, and humans are a product, a very differentiated product, gone out a long way from the source. A little bit like the prodigal son in the New Testament, who leaves the father's home and squanders his wealth and becomes destitute. He has left the source. He has gone so far out that he becomes destitute. He doesn't remember his origins anymore. No, so the dog, and even less so the flower or the tree, they haven't gone out that far, so to speak, from the source. There's still more of a connection with their origin. And this is also why they are not fearful of death. They don't think about, oh, I'm going to die. And when an animal dies, an animal is very accepting. It surrenders into that. It doesn't make a problem out of living, and it doesn't make a problem out of dying. It doesn't live on the level of problem making, which is a level when you lose your sense of connectedness with the source. Then, and this is because you identified with the thinking mind, then a world of problems arises. You create a world of, that's what you manifest then. And that's what you end up with on this planet, on this beautiful planet, which is paradise. You end up with layers and layers of complexity and increasing problems. Oh my God, it's getting so complicated. It's just survival is getting complicated, very complicated. So really now, when we talk about nature exists closer to the source, we have gone out very far, and for us it's not a return to the original level where the animal lives or the tree lives. It's a transcendence where you regain awareness of the source of being with full consciousness, rather than as a natural state, and you don't really know. The dog doesn't know that the dog is one with being. He just is one with being. The tree doesn't know. If you tell a tree, are you one with being? If the tree could understand you, of course, but it doesn't have conceptual. Tree is one with being? I don't know. So there's but if you look at nature, everything exists it's so much at rest within itself. It has so much integrity. Everything natural has such integrity. Integrity, the word originally means being one with yourself, not having split yourself into two or three. For example, when you say, me and my life. The tree doesn't say me and my life, my difficult life. The tree is life, an expression of life. The human says, I have a hard life. And the hard life that the human says he or she has is a mental construct, because it has no real reality except as a movement of thought. Because the only real life that you have is at this moment, ever, always. This is your life now. I'm sitting here, breathing, perceiving. There's aware presence. This is life. This is your life. The rest is memories or anticipation through thinking. So the dog doesn't have a life. The dog is an unproblematic expression of life. So is everything in nature. It is life manifesting the one timeless, sacred, the one deep down, the one formless life becoming form, as millions of life forms coming out of from. They say with the Big Bang it all started. Who knows? So before the Big Bang there was nothing. Nobody understands that because you can't understand nothing. No thing, no form, no time. Out of that void, which is also the fullness of infinite potential, came the forms. More and more differentiated over millions and millions of years. And then finally it becomes the human mind. The most differentiated, as far as we can see. There may be others even more mad somewhere else in the universe. And continuously thinking and analyzing and evaluating. And so, and then the entity that has to carry that mind is completely out of touch with the source. You're not cut off from the original source, the original oneness. You just don't know it's there. And so that's it. That's the state of being lost. Lost in your mind, lost in the world, split yourself in 2 or 3, having a life that you don't like. Me and my life, me and my story, my sad story. And then life is perceived no longer as a joyful expression of the underlying oneness, but becomes a burden. Oh. It gets heavier and heavier. And so this has happened to humanity. This species is at a critical stage now. There's a possibility of a shift into a deeper state, or higher state, if you want to call it that, of transcending conceptual thinking, going beyond. You can still think, but no longer trapped in thinking. This is where humanity has to go. And as you transcend conceptual thinking, you regain what was lost eons ago. You regain your sense of connectedness with being. You feel deep down you're connected with something vast, and it's not different from who you are. Just when we put it into language, it sounds as if that was something different from who you are. You're connected with being, with a sense of simple beingness. Being comes from the word to be, the most primordial thing. And everything in nature is an expression of that underlying beingness, and including the physical body, this body. All that we perceive in this world is existence. It exists. This body exists. Underlying existence is being. Being is the formless, timeless dimension within yourself. It's very much like the black hole at the center of the galaxy. When I was writing The Power of Now, I don't know why I wrote that, it just came to me one day. I wrote, there is a black hole at the center of every galaxy. And the editor saw it and said, you can't say that because you don't, how can you know that? The people are going to argue with that, so it was taken out. And some years later, I read an article by a scientist, and it said, now scientists believe that there is a black hole at the center of every galaxy. And so, why did I know that? I knew that because I could feel the black hole inside myself. The spacious, formless one life, the origin. And I know that the human being is a microcosm. It's just what you can understand the whole universe by understanding yourself. You are just a microscopic version of that. So we are regaining By no longer being lost in the conceptualizing mind, we regain something that was lost a long, long time ago, very much like the prodigal son in the New Testament. Your origin. Not your origin in, you can say it's not really your origin in time. It's not saying, okay, my origin was 6 billion years ago, that's where I started. When the Big Bang happened, that was the beginning of me. That's true, of course. That was the beginning, but it's not so much that the origin is in the distant past, or not even in the near past. The origin is timeless. Sometimes you may want to focus on one little thing, one flower, one leaf, one tree, one bird. And then at other times, you can take in the totality of a particular view. So you have a totality here of trees and plants and one or two houses, sky. So you can take in, but whether you focus on one thing or you focus on a larger landscape, larger section, visual section, sense yourself as the presence while you look. And that is how you become aware of the sacredness of nature. And nobody could explain to you what sacredness means, but you'll know, when you sense it, you'll know it. It's all an expression of the one place. It's all an expression of the underlying one life, one consciousness. And you love whatever you see, there's a sense of no longer a separateness, you love it. There's a joy that comes with seeing that. But the joy is there because you're in touch with yourself. So that is again an aspect of the balance between being and doing, to be aware of being while you do, and even when you're not doing something, not to lose consciousness. The danger is when you do activities, let's say your normal work situation, a little bit more complex than putting away clothes. The danger is that you lose yourself in the activity, and so you're no longer rooted in being, you're out there. And then the sign, the clear signal that you are out there and lost yourself in it is something arises like stress, anxiety, some negative reactivity, some belief that something out there is terribly important, that needs to be done now, and nothing else matters. So you lose yourself in the doing. Now, if you sit quietly in your room, the danger is that you drift off to sleep. At first you're there present, you're above thought, and then before you know it, you can observe it. Many years ago I spent some time occasionally in Buddhist monasteries, and you can observe the early morning meditation, especially when the monks sit 4:30, 5 o'clock, sitting for an hour for the early morning meditation. Now, I must have been not meditating all the time, because occasionally I opened my eyes and looked at the monks. And so at first they're always there, and then after 15, 20 minutes, some of them go. And of course, in a Zen monastery, you have the head monk who may hit you if he sees you're drifting off. That works. So don't overdo the being, not doing anything. To do it, sometimes don't say, I'm now going to sit for 1 hour in this room and be. No, just take it as it comes. There's a time for being and there's a time for doing. Now, many humans alive now actually feel very uncomfortable with just being. They can't do it. They can't do the being. Or when they're trying to be, they're trying to do the being, which is like trying to do the meditation. You can't do a meditation because the meditation is about being. Doing a meditation implies you want to get somewhere, but true meditation is you are somewhere. You go into the vertical dimension. So many humans are very uncomfortable with silence, can't stand it, need some noise, or they need continuous sensory or mental stimulation, need something to get my mental teeth into. And when they don't have it, they go very restless. The worst thing that you could do to them is put them in a room where they have no devices to produce noise. That would be hell for many humans these days. Sense deprivation of noise. So not with you though, because all of you are comfortable with being and with the absence of noise, and you're actually appreciative of silence. It's precious and it's beautiful. Now, you wouldn't want to have it all the time. No, needs to be a balance between noise and silence, and between thinking and not thinking, and doing and being. Some ancient cultures who are not yet lost in mental development, like our more advanced, so-called more advanced cultures, some ancient cultures, the people have a natural ability to just be, and they're not uncomfortable with being. It was reported by when North America, the Europeans came and settled the North American continent. I remember reading one a doctor or somebody observed people lining up somewhere in the States for a doctor's appointment, and some of them were Europeans who had come to America, and some were Native Americans. And it took so long, the doctor was overburdened with work, and these people, there were not enough chairs, people had to line up a long way, and whether it was a doctor or nurse who wrote about it, observed that all the Europeans became increasingly restless, and then they got very angry. What's going on? I've been here now for 3 hours. And all the Native Americans were just completely happy with just standing there. So the person who wrote it was so amazed that he wrote about it. So there's a natural ability to drop in and go still. Now, then the Westerners came, and then of course there was a clash between the old culture of the Native Americans and the mind-dominated culture of the West, and then many of the Native Americans became very confused and became very destructive for that culture. Now, when we go there, we've been through the development of the intellectual faculty and the mental faculty, and we come out the other end, and then we encounter that ability again, and even more deeper. If you haven't lost something, don't appreciate it that much, and you don't even know it that much. So for thousands of years, humans could actually drop into stillness, I'm sure, as these Native Americans could. They could drop into stillness quite easily. Perhaps they were fighting one moment, and the next moment they go. In the same way that a duck does it, as I describe in The Power of Now, the ducks get into a fight, and then 2 minutes later, flap their wings, completely back into stillness. So, but they didn't even know it. They just did it. They didn't know they did it. But when you lose something and then you regain it, there's always an element of depth to it that wasn't there before, because then you knowingly go into the stillness. It's not a natural thing anymore, it's a knowing thing. Power, really, it is feeling your inherent power. I don't often use that word, I did use it for a title of a book. But there is a source of power in you that transcends the person. And it's not egoic power over somebody, and it's one with the power that is the power of life in the universe, where all life arises. And people sometimes have a problem with self-confidence or valuing yourself. And sometimes you try to convince yourself by changing your thinking that you are actually good enough, that you should be self-confident. But there is a better way to find the source of self-confidence. On the egoic level, self-confidence is there because you see, you can tell yourself, I'm actually more intelligent than most of these people, or I'm better looking than most. I have to remind myself that I'm better looking than most, and then I feel a bit more confident now. Or you say, I actually have more money than these people, so I have more self-confidence. Whatever it is, some way of convincing yourself, and then you compare yourself with others, and then you focus on those areas where you feel superior to others, and try not to think about other areas where inevitably you are inferior to others, because you cannot be superior in all areas. It's a complicated game when you start comparing yourself to other people. And if you want to bolster your self-confidence, then you only have to focus on where you feel I'm actually better than most. But that doesn't really work that well. So there is a better way of self-confidence that has nothing to do with comparing yourself with others, or with feeling you're better than or not as good as. And that is direct access to inner power. You don't need any comparison. You can have it right now at this very moment, if you're not stuck in your thinking mind, but take your attention a little bit beyond the thinking mind, and then realize that you are the presence behind the thinking mind, without which there could be no thinking. You're the aware presence behind it all. That is deeper. You've gone deeper than the thinking mind. And that aware presence is where power resides. And it's not yours, because it connects you with universal power. Therefore, you don't need to compare yourself to anybody anymore, or feel, as the ego always does, that you're either superior or inferior to somebody else. That's not a comfortable way to live, where you have to classify yourself when you meet people. And so the fear is always, I might be inferior. Or behind that fear is a desire to be superior. And when you access true power, you recognize you can relate to humans without any sense of either superiority or inferiority. And that's amazing liberation. You can only do that when you feel your inherent power beyond the mind and mental images of who you are. It's wonderfully liberating to be able to meet other human beings and absolutely have no interest in finding out whether you're superior or inferior, because you see, it's a delusion anyway. And then you have that sense of absolute equality with every human being. They are all your equals, and you are their equals, which is nice when you met VIPs. Then you don't have to go, who am I compared to this person? You are consciousness, essentially, and this person is consciousness, essentially, which has taken form. So you may remember the story I told in one of the books. There was a Zen teacher, abbot of a Zen monastery in Japan, who was about to meet VIPs that were visiting the monastery. The governor of the province was coming with his staff, and as the governor of the province approached, the abbot got up to greet him, and at that moment he noticed the palms of his hands were sweaty which is a sign of nervousness. And so he was very much able to observe himself, and he observed that, but of course he went on with the ceremony of greeting the officials, and the next day he announced to the monks that he was going away, that his realization was not deep enough, because he explained he became nervous when the governor of the province came and he felt his palms got sweaty. So he was not deeply rooted in his own being. He went off for several years, and then he came back, and finally he was able to live in true connectedness with power, which is not personal. That's an amazing act of self-observation. Another act of self-observation you can do, you can observe when you relate to people, whether your behavior changes even slightly, whether you're talking to the lady who is cleaning your office, or whether you're talking to the CEO of the company. Observe in yourself, is the ego still operating? And don't beat yourself up if you find that the way in which you relate to the cleaning lady is different from the way you relate to the CEO of your company. That's an insight. Because whenever you discover the ego operating in you, which is built on image making, it's a great thing. It's meaning you're becoming more conscious. The process of becoming conscious often involves becoming conscious of your own ego and see it in action. If you then beat yourself up about it, that's more ego on top of the original ego. So you get layers of ego. Oh my God, I'm still not rid of my ego. No, ego is nothing. Even ego looks personal, but it's nothing personal really in ego. It's a pattern of behavior in humanity, in the collective unconscious that has been there and been growing for thousands of years. A separate sense of identity, a sense of separateness. Yes, so observe whether a great sign that you're beyond ego is that you're the same with everybody, and you feel actually the same with everybody. And if you don't, then you can observe the ego in action. But when you observe the ego, it begins to change. It cannot sustain itself in the light of your observation. The ego requires your unconsciousness. So all the egoic patterns in you can only survive if you don't know what you're doing. But if you know what you're doing, in other words, you're there as the witness, as it's sometimes called, the observing presence, then the ego cannot survive when you recognize it as silly, for example, or you smile at it, and you see how silly it is to play one kind of role with one person, and then play another kind of role with somebody else who has a different social function. Why? What for? You're not yourself. You're not yourself. You're not yourself, neither with the CEO nor with the cleaning lady. Each is a role, and the ego plays many roles. So is it possible to not play roles? Yes, just be straight, be yourself is the famous saying. And of course the question is, well, how can I be myself? Who is myself? So you cut through the mental go to the place of power and feel that the presence, right now, for example, you are both a person and the deeper presence. The moment you start thinking about where you're going to go next, or you think about what happened this morning, or what's awaiting you next week, or anything else. You are the person. And the moment you drop down into just spacious presence, which feels very much alive, you are the aware presence. You're not a person right now. Oh, yes. Surrender. Surrender to the light. A slight modification of the dictum, accept what is. We could also say, it's a slightly different signpost. Accept your experience of this moment, or accept whatever you're experiencing at this moment. So if you're experiencing resistance, mental, emotional resistance, then you would have to accept that. That seems to be a contradiction, almost an impossibility, because can one accept non-acceptance? You will have to find it out. Similarly, if you feel unhappy in whatever form, instead of wanting not to feel unhappy, and thereby, as you can't get rid of your unhappiness, feeling even more unhappy, you could also try to just be okay with being unhappy. So you no longer complain about being unhappy. Well, so let me be unhappy. It's just I'm suggesting it as an experiment. Next time you're unhappy, what happens if you are okay with being unhappy? Because the essence of unhappiness is not being okay. So if you're not okay with whatever it is, and some people are unhappy about something abstract that they call my life. They're not necessarily unhappy about a single event or a few things that should be happening, but they have this entire huge thing they call my life, and they're unhappy with it. Which means a large part, if not the entire part of the entirety of your identity is unhappy. And there are people walking on this planet who are almost or literally permanently in a state of unhappiness. And they may be, the strange thing is, it is often not the people who have the least in the world, but it's often possibly the case that there's more unhappiness to be found in the wealthier parts of the world. So if whatever it is experiment with it and see, to be totally okay with whatever you're experiencing at this moment. So I don't mind being unhappy. It could be that something happens to the unhappiness when you're completely okay with it. It could be that the two states of being okay with something, with the unhappiness and the unhappiness, cannot coexist. Strange. You might have noticed that the thin layer of ice on the lake is slowly beginning to dissolve in the sunshine, forming beautiful patterns like abstract paintings. It's just like the patterns in your mind, conditioned mind patterns, slowly dissolve in the sun of awareness. But it's amazing that it does take quite a while for this ice to completely go away on the lake. One could use this ice as an analogy also for consciousness. We could say, ice, of course, is water in a particular state. And we could say, talking about consciousness, that ice is like inanimate matter. Things, so-called inanimate things, are like frozen consciousness. And then water can become liquid. And that would be, in this analogy, consciousness becomes a living thing, something that is alive, rather than so-called inanimate matter. Although inanimate matter isn't all that inanimate, it only looks inanimate. As we all know, there's intense movement, even in a stone and a pebble. There's continuous motion of the atoms and molecules with vast spaces in between, so it is alive in its own way. So frozen consciousness is matter, and then it becomes liquid, and then that means it's living things. And then what can happen to water is that it can become vapor, and then it rises up. It becomes invisible, unless it's very close together, but there's moisture in the air and you can't see it. And that would be mind, consciousness becoming, manifesting as mind. So you have those three stages. It's interesting, if you look upon matter as frozen consciousness, then you have a different relationship with matter. Nothing is totally inanimate, so everything ultimately is alive. Probably even a physicist would agree with that, but there's a big difference between something that is There's a big difference between a pebble and a worm. There's already what it is. Nobody knows exactly how does so-called inanimate matter suddenly become something else. And there's a big difference between a worm and you, I think. Because you have a mind. The conditions in your life, they can fulfill you for a while, and then it's no longer fulfilling. This happens to relationships, it happens to jobs that you find, activities. Unless you go deeper, nothing is fulfilling for very long. You are not a set of problems that you need to resolve. So let's go back to that beautiful, very simple realization that you don't need to remember anything about what your mind tells you who you are. It doesn't mean that you now have lost all your memories. No, they are still there if you need them. They come back. Whatever analogy you want to use, I used to say the filing system, when you need it, you can pull it out, but they don't use it anymore. So it's a computer analogy you use now. It's there somewhere in your computer. It's all still there. When you need it, of course, it's still there. But does it have to be there always when you don't need it? That continuous, the problematic self-talk, do you need to be burdened and walk around every day of your life burdened by the problem making? Well, it's pretending to be problem solving, but it's really problem making of your mind, and to carry around with you the heavy entity, the me, which goes, and you're trying to get to a point, at some future point you think, I'm going to be liberated and free of all that, and then I will start living. And many people, even if they don't verbalize it as I do right now, the underlying mindset is, when I can free myself from all these problems, then I can start living. And that, of course, when you are 25, you can still believe that. When you're 35, you say, yeah, it can still happen. And when you become 45 and 50, okay, maybe I'll really start living when I retire. And then you begin to live for the retirement. Okay, only another 3 years now. And finally the day comes, and then on the first day of your retirement you sit at home and say, what now? Who am I without my function, my social function? But nobody's telling me who I am anymore. What am I going to do now? And then you try golf. And you drive around in the golf buggies. And for a few weeks it feels good and you can drink and so. And then that dissatisfaction returns. The same mindset is still there despite your retirement. In fact, you become more aware of the dissatisfied mind now that you don't have to have that many external problems anymore, and yet there's still the heaviness of the mind and the discontent. So that's not the way to go. So the wonderful news is there is a dimension in you that we could call the dimension of depth, or the transcendent dimension, where you as the person becomes something else, where the person can only really often compare the person that you are to the ripple on the surface of the ocean. That's the person. But the ripple is one with the totality of the ocean. If the ripple doesn't know that, its existence is problematic, fearful. You fear every other ripple, or you want to incorporate them into your life. Maybe if we come with me, together we'll be a bigger ripple. Marry me. And you will make me happy, and I will make you happy. It has been tried many times. So to lead a satisfying existence as a ripple that only knows itself as the ripple and not as the ocean is very frustrating. You can't. It doesn't work. So the ripple needs to realize that it is much deeper than just the ripple. There's a depth to the ripple where it's no longer a ripple, where it's connected with everything and with every other ripple, where it's connected with the heart of the universe, not just on a human level. And that is true awakening. And after that, and when that is realized, and the ripple can sense that, it's a stillness in you, a presence that has no particular content, then the ripple becomes relatively happy. It doesn't mean in the world, on the surface of ripples, things still can go wrong, still things can disappear and break down, and ripples never last for very long. That continues, and yet you feel you can actually enjoy your ripple identity and enjoy the surface of life also. It's actually quite nice. Here, look at all those little ripples. And ripple means whatever you perceive in this analogy. A ripple means whatever life form is there in your perception, including yourself, and whether it's humans or whatever you perceive in this existence, it is the manifestation of life, of the one life that has manifested as a multiplicity of life forms. And each life form is inhabited by the one life, a manifestation of the one life or the one consciousness. And when you realize that, and that's the beginning of that realization is to sense the I that has nothing to do with your past or your future or your name or anything your mind is saying. Your simple presence. That means the ripple is becoming aware of something much bigger. And suddenly we have a relatively happy ripple. And it can enjoy every moment of its ripple existence in a sense of wonder, because it's no longer demanding that things that are not permanent should be permanent. And it's not demanding anymore that the surface existence of things should satisfy me. You're here to satisfy me. You're here to make me happy. You're here to fulfill me. The surface of the ripple can't do that. The conditions in your life, they can fulfill you for a while, and then it's no longer fulfilling. This happens to relationships, it happens to jobs that you find, activities. Unless you go deeper, nothing is fulfilling for very long. And so this is why we are here, and this is the meaning of retreat. It's a retreat from yourself in order to find what the Buddhists would call the no-self, or what other teachings would call the deeper self, or the Atman, or your Buddha nature, or the Christ within, whatever term you want to use to point to it. And that's why we're here. So all the external things here are helpful. It's easier here to connect with the depths of who you are and realize the depths of who you are. Of course, when you leave here, then you get challenged again. It's not that you don't get challenged here too, and especially if you're still very much identified with the mind, you find many challenges wherever you go. This isn't right. Don't like that. He doesn't look very spiritual to me. Or the opposite, all these people are so much more spiritual than me. Do they know that I'm not spiritual? So the practice is to voluntarily, as much as possible, relinquish identification with the thinking mind and your usual self. And what very much helps with that is just as much as you can. Don't walk around as a heavy personality and person. No, walk around as a light, as a field of conscious perception, and like a little child that goes and look at everything. In other words, presence practice. Here, it's more easier than in your usual surroundings. Presence practice, present moment practice,